Avi Melamed is a former Israeli intelligence official and founder of Inside the Middle East Institute, joining us now live to break down all of the latest details. As you can tell, a lot of them here. Avi, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us this morning.
Hello, Josh. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, first off, I want to get your thoughts here. As we did mention, the head of the CIA is meeting there with Qatari and Israeli officials. Does it appear that we are any closer to another hostage deal, another temporary ceasefire amid this war?
I don't know to say if we are closer. It seems like there is an attempt on both sides somehow to move on that trajectory. But I think we should all understand that it's a very complicated process. For both sides, Hamas is trying to hold as much as possible to exhaust this card of the hostages, because Hamas hopes that through negotiating that card, he will be able to stop the Israeli offensive. The Israeli government, on the other hand, have to deal with the enormous pressure of the families of the hostages and public opinion in Israel that at the same time demand the Israeli government both to release the hostages as soon as possible, but also at the same time to continue with the mission of eliminating Hamas military power. So the bottom line of this whole almost zero-sum game is that we will see more and more obstacles on the process of maybe, hopefully, releasing of the hostages.
We know, as I mentioned here, that some of Israel's closest allies, France, the UK, Germany, they are calling for essentially a ceasefire now. The U.S., though, does say that it remains strong with Israel. Does any of this, in your opinion, affect the way that Netanyahu is operating and the way that the IDF is operating?
Well, Josh, the answer is yes and no. It's no in the sense that the Israeli government is determined to continue and to achieve the objective of eliminating Hamas rule. One major power that pushes that direction, and we have to be very much aware of that, is Israel's public opinion. The Israeli public opinion, wall to wall, there is a consensus that Hamas must be eliminated, its military power must be eliminated. And the finding that we find in Gaza Strip, and particularly, like, for example, the huge strategic tunnel that Israeli forces revealed just the other day, they all reiterate time and again the danger that Hamas presents. Israeli public opinion will not settle down for anything than removing this military threat on Israeli communities. On the other hand, obviously, Israel has to be tuned to the messages of its friends, and particularly the United States of America. So when we are talking about a ceasefire, I would even say that maybe we are looking at something that the middle way, sort of speaking, would be a ceasefire that is a temporary, just aim for the releasing of the hostages. But I think that in the end of the day, Israeli government and the IDF keep eyes on the ball. The objective, in the end of the day, two objectives: to release the hostages and to end Hamas rule in Gaza Strip and to crush its military spine.
And the IDF does say that Israel is being attacked by Hezbollah terrorists that are firing from those UN areas and Lebanese armed forces compounds. This may be a tough question to answer, but how exactly does something like this happen? How do they get over to those areas, and how are they able to fire there into Israel?
Well, Josh, Hamas is scattered all around South Lebanon, openly violating United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. Its presence has always been there, and in proximity to both not only United Nations international forces deployed in South Lebanon, but also the Lebanese army. And obviously, this is part of a tactic that, in the end of the day, like Hamas, Hezbollah is operating also from massively urban areas, and is trying to take advantage of the presence of United Nations forces and the Lebanese army, hoping that an Israeli retaliation against Hamas attacks, targeting Hamas positions in location or in proximity to those areas, will result in some international condemning of Israel. It's part of Hezbollah's tactic. It's not something that we are not familiar with.
And as somebody who is a former Israeli intelligence official, I do want to get your thoughts on this, as reports are indicating that the IDF is pumping seawater into those tunnels that we know are underneath Gaza. There are a lot of them, and we've seen video from inside. Does that put the hostages possibly in danger, the ones that are still being held by Hamas, as we do know that some of them are being kept in those tunnels?
Well, the whole military operation offensive of Israel in Gaza Strip, to a large extent, also involves, high risk for the hostages that are being held by Hamas. Not only the issue of the flooding of the tunnels, the whole combat that is going on in Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, we had a couple of days ago this tragic incident when Israeli soldiers mistakenly shot down 3 of the hostages that were able to escape from the prison. But one of the major issues that we have to take into consideration is that Israel is doing an enormous effort to try as much as possible to make sure that before he makes any substantial move, like, for example, eliminating tunnels, or in that case, flooding the tunnels, Israel is doing an enormous effort to try to verify there are no hostages in those locations. But yet again, we have to take into consideration that it's a very complicated combat. It takes place in an environment which is mostly residential. We know that apparently the kidnappers are moving the hostages from one location to another. So there is constantly, all the time, a risk for the well-being of the hostages while the Israeli Defense Forces are operating in Gaza Strip.
What role does it appear that Iran is playing in all of this conflict? We've heard Iran mentioned really ever since October 7th, when that first attack happened, and then when the war itself officially started. What role is Iran playing overall in this conflict?
Iran plays a very significant role. It's the mastermind beyond what we see, not only, by the way, Josh, in Gaza Strip. All the flares of violence that we see today across the Middle East, in Gaza Strip, along the Israeli-Lebanese border, the skirmish between Israel and Hezbollah, the attacks of Iraqi Shiite militias against United States bases in Syria and Iraq, and the attacks of Houthis in Yemen against some ships at the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the Red Sea. All those things are orchestrated and guided and instructed by the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime is the mastermind beyond all the things that we are seeing here. And it's been, unfortunately, an outcome of many years of lacking the inability, I would say, of the international community to decisively confront the challenge of the Iranian regime. We see today Iranian-backed militias that are holding Israelis as hostages. And now the sad news is that another Iranian-backed militia, the Houthis in Yemen, are now holding the world hostage.
The trip from U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to Israel came days after Biden criticized Netanyahu. What message do you think that Austin's visit really sent to Israel and the officials there, but also to the U.S. as they are watching this war play out?
Look, the position and policy of the Biden administration vis-a-vis this whole war has many ins and outs. It has different dimensions. On the one hand, the Biden administration totally identifies and supports the major objective of toppling down Hamas rule in Gaza Strip. Biden himself was very clear about it, and I think this is indeed a real interest of the United States administration. On the other hand, as you all know, there are other segments that the Biden administration has to take into consideration, like the political pressure from within home with the upcoming elections in the states, international public opinion, and so on. So I think that there is a constant effort, real genuine effort of the United States to really coordinate with Israel the whole scheme of things in order to be able to make sure that, on the one hand, the objective, meaning toppling down Hamas regime in Gaza Strip, will be obtained, will be achieved, but on the other hand, in a way that also will take into consideration the needs, the interests of the United States beyond the context of the war. So I think that every visit of a senior U.S. official, Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin to Israel, definitely aims to, in the end of the day, I would say, not to dictate actions on the ground or the trajectory of the things, but basically to coordinate with Israel and to make sure that they are all on the same page.
We've seen attacks on U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria now top 100 after the war did begin. What is the significance of that, and could that impact the U.S. involvement in the war overall?
Well, Josh, as I mentioned before, all the attacks that we see across the region today, either in Israeli-Lebanese border, Hezbollah, or the Iraqi Shiite militias, or the Houthis in Yemen, are masterminded by the Iranian regime. And the purpose beyond that is that the Iranian regime tries to put pressure on the United States, hinting that unless the United States is going to restrain Israel and to actually stop Israel's war against Hamas, the Iranian regime will increase the attacks carried out by its proxies. And by doing that, threatening the United States to drag the whole region to a regional war, assuming the Iranian regime is assuming that the United States has no interest in being dragged into such a regional war. So the whole purpose of those attacks, as you mentioned before, in the end of the day, is to put this pressure, this Iranian pressure on the United States administration. This is the mastermind beyond this whole tactic that is being applied by the Iranians and their proxies.
All right, Avi Melamed, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here and help break down all the latest for us. We appreciate it.
Of course, Josh. Thank you so much.
Thank you.